because I think that there will be extraordinary opportunities in the next 5 to 10 years, those people who have designed a business that will be perceived positively in a local community somewhere on earth are going to be ahead of the game. They'll be kind of at the bleeding edge. So I would encourage people to think well beyond existing boundaries to what would be possible if I had a great legal system in a developing nation with low taxes and regulations.
Tired of doing the same thing day after day? Seeing the same people talk about the same things? Hearing politicians promise the same BS?
Don't let anybody tell you that it's corporations and businesses that create jobs.
My change in party will enable me to be re-elected.
Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country.
Well, you don't have to anymore. Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about everything related to living outside your borders. Jonathan Lockwood here with James Guzman. Hey, James.
How you doing, Jonathan?
So what is the deal in San Miguel de Allende? It's frigging cold, man.
Relatively. It's nothing like the snow they're getting up north, but...
yeah, I'm from Michigan. It's not. Yeah. I mean, it does hit 70 in the day, but at night it's getting down into the 30s.
Yeah, you got to throw on a sweatshirt or something.
Yeah. Anyway, when does it start warming up again? February?
I think a couple months, and then that's going to be it.
I'll deal
back
with that.
to the springtime weather.
Okay. So, as you know, here at the Borderless Podcast, we try to present practical advice to people who are interested in more self-reliance, perhaps location-independent businesses, perhaps living internationally. We've got a lot of people who are interested in where the latest, best place is. The best place to live, to own a business, to enjoy as free a life as possible. And while we don't really think there is an ideal Shangri-La, we do recognize some places are better than others in that regard. So we hear about free city projects from time to time. We hear about seasteading. And for some time now, we've been hearing about a project in Honduras. And although there have been some roadblocks, apparently these hopes are still alive in the form of ZEDEs, that is ZEDE, Zones for Economic Development and Employment. And so in that regard, we have as our guest today, Michael Strong. Now, Michael co-founded Freedom Lights Our World, FLOW, the predecessor organization to Conscious Capitalism Incorporated with John Mackey. You know him as the CEO of Whole Foods, in order to promote entrepreneurial and capitalist solutions to world problems. He's the leader, along with Muhammad Yunus, 2006 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Hernando de Soto, co-chair of the UN Commission on the Legal Empowerment of the Poor, John Mackey, and others of Be the Solution, How Entrepreneurs and Conscious Capitalists Can Solve All the World's Problems. Before that, Michael spent 15 years creating and leading innovative schools based on Montessori, Socratic, and entrepreneurial principles, including a charter school named the 36th best public high school in the U.S. He's also the author of The Habit of Thought, From Socratic Seminars to Socratic Practice. Michael's current work includes a focus on the entrepreneurial creation of communities, legal systems, and city-scale development. In 2012, he signed an agreement with the Honduran government to develop a zone which would have featured a legal system optimized for economic development. While the legislation on which that agreement was based was invalidated by the Honduran courts, he is working on a similar project in Honduras based on a more robust legal foundation. Welcome, Michael Strong.
Hello. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, talk to us, Michael. Well, I guess, there's not much left to say. That bio was pretty complete.
Well, thank you. A lot of these are long-term big projects. So, first, let me set the foundation for how I became interested in the Free Cities, Startup Cities project, which the Honduran ZEDEs are the best examples of. When I began working with John Mackey on entrepreneurial solutions to world problems, we quickly ran into the fact that the leading cause of poverty are the poor governance in developing nations. That if we could solve this problem, and in particular create free market legal systems with rule of law, property rights, and economic freedom, then almost any place could become prosperous. Hong Kong and Singapore, the highest levels of economic freedom, have in the last 50 years gone from being roughly as poor as African countries today in 1960 to now two of the richest jurisdictions on earth. There have been countless similar examples, sometimes in the form of special economic zones, which traditionally were reduced taxes and regulation. But a number of people in the free zone movement, special economic zone movement, began to realize that the next stage in their development would be not merely reduced taxes and regulations, but actually installing a new legal system. Because in a free zone in a developing nation, even if you have reduced taxes and regulations, if the judicial system and criminal justice system and legal system are still flawed in various ways, then it still may not be a great place to do business. So the next generation special economic zone involved actually installing, so to speak, a new legal system within a zone. The first example of this was the Dubai International Financial Center, where in 2003, the rulers of Dubai decided they wanted to create basically an international financial center. They had Sharia law, which is, of course, not very friendly to finance. So they looked around the world at New York, London, Chicago, Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney, all of which ran British common law legal systems. And they simply created a zone with 110 acres where the judicial system was British common law, and the judicial system was administered by a respected, retired commercial law judge from England. And the Dubai International Financial Center has been a spectacular success. At this point, many of the world's big financial corporations have offices there. It's brought in immense amounts of foreign direct investment. And last year, Abu Dhabi declared that it would replicate the Dubai model. So they are actually creating a zone with common law legal system as well. While working on, looking at that model, I began working with people in the free zone industry to replicate that kind of model in other countries. I had a project where we were providing common law legal systems in conjunction with real estate developers in Mexico and in Estonia, when the Honduran government announced that it was actually going to allow explicitly for zones with their own legal systems. And as you mentioned, there were some judicial obstacles the first time around, and many people thought the project was dead. Then last year, the Honduran government passed new and better legislation. And in January, they appointed a committee for the adoption of best practices, which is the governing board for these zones. And that committee features some of the leading free market thinkers in the world. Grover Norquist is actually on that board, as is Mark Skousen, Richard Rahn, who played a leading role in the Cayman Islands transition to a leading financial center. So we are very optimistic that the Honduran ZEDEs are going to provide an extraordinary opportunity for rule of law and economic freedom superior to that in Hong Kong, which by some metrics is the best current jurisdiction in the world. So I'll kind of pause there. There are countless aspects of this. I'll check in to see which direction you're most interested in.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And in case people they have the hard time wrapping their head around what you're saying, I think that a good way to kind of explain it, which you did in one of the TED Talks that I saw you had on YouTube, is startup culture. And we want to kind of spur startup cities, meaning that you have different types of cities that people can start, different governance systems, and in this way, people can choose between these different kind of competing systems. And so, is that a good way to explain it?
Yeah. In general, I'm a big fan of startup culture. Technology startups have absolutely revolutionized the world in the last 30 or 40 years. We all have these cell phones that are just amazing devices. And, in every respect, things have gotten faster, better, cheaper. Anytime technology and entrepreneurs have been allowed to fix things, so to speak, or improve things. So one way to think about this is you can simply take an existing legal system, as Dubai has done, and put it in a jurisdiction. What the Honduran ZEDEs provide for is the possibility of ongoing improvements. So, for instance, to give you a very specific example, the group that I'm working with is developing technology based on the blockchain used for Bitcoin, so that we can have a faster, cheaper, better arbitration system. The world of private arbitration is well developed, and often nation states and oil companies will get involved in huge arbitration disputes, sometimes with billions of dollars at stake. And the private arbitration system is largely trusted and respected to adjudicate those disputes. But big corporate private adjudication is a bit pricey for most of us. So the entrepreneurs I'm working with on the technology side are working to create, as much as possible, smart contracts that can be adjudicated using blockchain technology with specialized human arbitrators that will be lower cost when the technology is not adequate. Just to give you a quick prep on smart contracts, a simple example of a smart contract would be if you lease a car and you don't make your payments, then the next morning the car doesn't start. It wouldn't turn off while you're going down the highway. But that sort of, if there are simple criteria for whether or not the contract has been broken, then that can be completely done via software. And using blockchain technology, people from around the world can engage in contractual relationships. We're developing the platform for that, such that you can reliably execute a contract with a stranger across the world. Of course, there will be some cases where it's not as clear-cut as you didn't pay your lease, in which case it could go to arbitration. Our system will provide baseball arbitration. You pick an arbitrator, I pick an arbitrator, they pick an arbitrator. But our idea is to have very specialized arbitrators that are lower cost, so that ordinary businesses can afford private arbitration rather than either existing private arbitration models or nation-state legal systems, which are long, slow, and expensive.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's very interesting. As far as this kind of startup companies, entrepreneurship and stuff, most people think of, different tech companies and things like that, but there's no reason that we can't apply that to other realms of our life, like, judicial systems and that kind of thing as well. I mean, we have very kind of old, outdated judicial systems with no type of competition presently.
Well, exactly. And some of this comes from my background as an educator, where I realized it's possible to create much better models of education. And we've got this default government operating system in education, such that even most private schools are basically imitations of the public school. But it's perfectly arbitrary, and one can do very different things. To take a different example, I'm really excited about private systems of criminal justice that are superior to nation-state systems of criminal justice. The situation in Ferguson has called attention to police abuse. Whatever one thinks of the two parties, I think that it's possible to adjudicate disputes on the streets with less force than is often used. In my Facebook feed, I'm constantly getting these cases of I would say police overreacting, and at the same time, sometimes they're not successful at preventing crime. I think a private criminal justice system will, over time, become better at both preventing crime as well as fewer cases of police abuse, because in the private market, systems evolve. And if you have a criminal justice contractor who's not providing the best service, you just fire them and get a different one. By contrast, in nation-state systems, you're basically stuck with the police department in your city, the prosecutors in your city, the judges in your city, and I would say the process of voting does not provide an adequate safeguard for either citizens' rights or security of property and person.
Well, this is exciting. I mean, we're used to recognizing the role that taxation and regulation plays in the prosperity of a nation or for a business climate, but we're actually talking about changing the legal system, and you've helped us to appreciate why that's so important. But talk to us a little bit about what happened in Honduras. I was hearing all sorts of exciting things a while back, and then all of a sudden the courts invalidated it. Can you help us understand why?
by almost unanimous majorities. To give you a little bit of backstory on that, in 2009, there was a constitutional crisis where the president of the country had begun abusing the powers of the state. At one point, he had actually surrounded the Congress, the Honduran Congress, and was with tanks and required that they approve the judicial candidate that he wanted, which is pretty outrageous. And so when this happened, that was the beginning of a 6-month process that led to Manuel Zelaya being taken to Costa Rica in the middle of the night by the Honduran military. Both the Honduran Congress and the Honduran Supreme Court had approved this, and yet much of the world regarded it as a military coup. I always think it's strange to call it a military coup when Zelaya had been so outrageous prior to that, and the Congress and Supreme Court approved the action. In any case, following this incident, foreign aid massive amounts of foreign aid were pulled by the United States and Europe, so that Honduras, which is already one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, was really hurting. And Hillary Clinton was sent down there to tell the Hondurans they were bad and should bring back their president and that kind of thing. The Honduran establishment, who knew Zelaya, the political establishment, Congress, Supreme Court, and so forth, they knew Zelaya was crazy, and they stuck by their guns and refused to bring him back, despite the international pressure. After about 6 months, they held a new election, and in the new election, Pepe Lobo was elected, and most observers regarded it as a fair election, and so Honduras began to be readmitted to the international community. But what that incident had done was it made Hondurans realize they couldn't trust the assessment of the global community, that if they didn't want to be dependent on foreign aid and outsiders anymore. And so there was interest in the government to create something like these zones. When Paul Romer, a prominent economist, did a TED talk on a similar topic, he called them charter cities, and they realized this would add credibility to a project they'd wanted to do anyway. An American advisor, Mark Klugman, had come up with the ZEDE notion, they were called REDs that time. So there was a campaign put on to get this legislation passed. As I said, it was passed almost unanimously. Among other things, they had the good sense to fly key leaders of key parties to Singapore and Hong Kong and Shenzhen in China and show them, a few decades ago, these were poor, now they're rich. So there was a lot of enthusiasm. That said, there was Manuel Zelaya, who had been sent out, had become a follower of Hugo Chavez, and there was a strong Chavista left in Honduras, and they were very opposed to this essentially free market reform. So they had filed a number of legal actions against the legislation, and these legal actions slowly worked their way through the court, and although we had been told by the Honduran government that they would not actually be a threat, it turns out that the judges ruled against the constitutionality based on these legal challenges of the legislation, and so the first version was thrown out. One of the key issues had to do with sovereignty. It was regarded as a violation of Honduran sovereignty, the way the project was structured the first time. So the second time around, a couple of things. One is Romer's version had allowed external nations to actually govern over a portion of land, and that was clearly a violation of sovereignty. But the other thing they did the second time around, which was an improvement, is they based the new legislation on expanded municipal autonomy. Already, many Honduran municipalities have more autonomy than they use, and by giving local municipalities considerably more autonomy, they, in effect, created a similar program, but with much more local buy-in than was the case with the original legislation. Okay, so now you guys are continuing to try to work on this, or are there some other projects that are similar to this going on, or what's going on now? Well, so within Honduras, they've had a lot of attention from the Korean government to do a project based on this legislation on the Pacific coast. Our projects have all been based on the Caribbean coast. It's tropical, it's gorgeous, it's a wonderful place to live. if you can get good law and security there, which we're working on. But the Korean government would be doing perhaps a big project. And there's some controversy over that because, of course, government-to-government relationships sometimes forget the little guy. But I think that the intention is to create jobs in Honduras, and Honduras so desperately needs jobs that I think a Korean project on the Pacific coast that create a lot of jobs will be exciting. And we're currently waiting for the Committee for the Adoption of Best Practices to announce the rules for how we would actually receive permission to develop a ZEDE. They want to be scrupulously careful this time around that the projects are loved and respected by Hondurans. And so we're waiting for those rules to come down, and then we will apply to develop a ZEDE. And if so, within a few years, we should have a gorgeous place on the Caribbean coast that's a very free market and a world-class business environment.
Well, it doesn't hurt that it's gorgeous. But Michael, let's ask you, so what will this mean for someone who is interested, for instance, in moving to Honduras? How does this play out? If things go as you hope they do reasonably, what will this mean for somebody wanting to move there and perhaps do business there?
So first, let me mention a constraint. Because this legislation is explicitly designed to create jobs for Hondurans, there is a requirement that 90% of the jobs and 85% of the payroll go to Honduran nationals. There is some flexibility around that in that, if you can demonstrate that a Honduran national is not available to do a particular kind of skilled labor, then you don't have to adhere to that requirement strictly. That said, I think it's good for people to be aware of that requirement. Our specific project, is designed to create great education based in part on work I'm doing so that there will be a pipeline of skilled Hondurans. So with those limitations said, we anticipate developing a zone in which Americans can obtain residency and become a long-term, in essence, citizen of these zones with the cap on taxation is 12%. We're looking at a land tax and then user fees for anything beyond that. And the land tax would finance the criminal justice system and basic infrastructure. Beyond that, we anticipate zero taxes on income, on investment, on transactions. Many of us involved in this kind of have a Georgist perspective. So we intend to allow people to be very free tax-wise. With respect to regulation, we'll start with kind of default set of rules that are based on common law. We're using the restatements of law, which is a private summary of U.S. common law. Beyond that, we want to create systems that are more free than existing systems, but which are still respectful of international norms. So I'll give you a very specific example. Healthcare innovation, I think, is a legitimate concern for Americans because healthcare has become massively overregulated. I've known people who believe that we could cure many diseases if we had more free market healthcare system. But rather than have it be a total Wild West, we're developing a prototype of a system whereby if one is, say, based on the advice of a medical expert, 5 years away, a terminal illness with 5 years left to live, then you can have any treatment you want. If it's, say, 10 years from death based on the advice of a medical expert, then perhaps one would need the advice of several experts before having a treatment. But instead of going through an FDA approval, we want to just limit the sort of craziest versions. There are people who do pretty crazy things medical care-wise. So we want to have some framework within which there's some sort of legitimacy to the medical treatments while also allowing a lot more experimentation. So we're in the process of designing these systems so that people know that if you come here, there are reasons to believe that there is a sensible framework within which to receive medical care while also being extremely free. Similarly, on the finance side, our number one goal will be to respect U.S. law. Many people ask, aren't you afraid of the Honduran government? We're much more afraid of getting sideways with U.S. government, so we want to be scrupulously clean with respect to financial reporting, and also, of course, narcotics legislation. So insofar as people view this as a radical libertarian utopia, that's not quite true. Because first and foremost, we have to be responsible to the U.S. government and international norms. But within that, we will be as free as we legitimately can be.
You can't have everything, right?
No. And really, the U.S. government is the big bully in the block. I know a lot of people interested in innovations in finance, innovations in medicine, and so forth. And there's evidence that the U.S. government will go after people, I would say illegally, if they don't like what you're doing. So our number one concern is to create a safe haven for job creation and prosperity for Hondurans and international residents. And part of creating that safe haven is not to annoy the big guy.
So would you say that, for people that have this idea of a more decentralized world in the future, from your experience, would you say that's not possible as long as the United States exists in its current form?
Well, to be optimistic, I got this from Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel was the one who first came up with the basic notion that if in 20 years we have many more jurisdictions, there will be a lot more freedom than if we have fewer. Mm-hmm. So right now there are about 200 jurisdictions. If that consolidated down to, say, 30, a bunch of EU sorts of organizations around the world, then the future of freedom looks pretty bleak. If, on the other hand, it expands from 200 to 1,000, future of freedom looks pretty bright. We've got a blog, Let 1,000 Nations Bloom, with a lot of good content on there related to this. Because, even the fact that Edward Snowden had some place to run to. Estonia just provided e-citizenship, so you can apply for citizenship virtually. Holland has had legalized or quasi-legal marijuana for some time now. States in the U.S. do. Portugal decriminalized all drugs. What we need are lots of jurisdictions that compete with one another so that, because the U.S. is not going to invade 5 different countries for really trivial sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So really it's a matter of creating on the one hand, I do believe we need to change the attitudes so that people realize that all of our prosperity is based on the freedom to innovate. And if we destroy the freedom to innovate, we destroy the possibilities of ever improving quality of life. But beyond that ideological battle, we also do need to have lots of competing jurisdictions. I am very excited about the blockchain, and I know blockchain enthusiasts who believe that at this point the government can't possibly stop it, and there will be a parallel world of free commerce out in the blockchain. And then because we already have 200 jurisdictions, many of which are very desperately poor countries, some of those poor countries, whether it's Honduras or not, will provide on-the-ground options for the freedoms that initially can only exist on the blockchain.
Michael, you always have something exciting to talk about. I've seen you interviewed many times. When we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit more about what this might mean for some of our listeners specifically, and maybe some other ideas you might have for them. But right now, we're going to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, your online leader in promoting moral superiority. And there's a big announcement. The Condescending Group presents their annual retreat, Global Condescension 2015, to be held March 26th through 29th in San Francisco. Yes, there'll be all sorts of la-di-da guests speaking on a variety of self-aggrandizing topics, but there'll also be lots of downtime where you can meet with other slackers, never having to be confronted by hardworking, productive sorts. There'll be time to eat organic finger foods, sip the latest trendy wines, appreciate shitty art, and talk about why you go to Burning Man every year, but why it's all so environmentally distasteful for 4 straight days. That's right, rub elbows with the sneering and the snooty, March 26th through 29th at Global Condescension 2015. For more info, go to thecondescendinggroup.com. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. Okay, so we're back with Michael Strong. Michael Strong is an author and pioneer in education and independent learning. And we're mainly talking about these ZEDEs. We're talking about the idea of freedom. And he's helped us to appreciate that in addition to taxation and regulation, the legal system itself plays a very important role. He's obviously been thinking on this for a very long time. But what I wanted to ask you about specifically is we've got a lot of people. Let's say you're 30 years old, you have a business, and you'd like to maybe you want to move to Honduras. Maybe this plays out nicely, and you've got a staff of 1. That's you. Are the ZEDEs something right for you? Will it require that you hire a Honduran?
That's a great question. So first of all, the short answer to that one is no. If you're an independent, entrepreneur, then you don't have to. You have no employees. So the requirement that 90% of your workforce be Honduran simply doesn't apply. There also is room, and I envision actually that some companies will be structured as partnerships of independent contractors, such that there's even more flexibility around that. In the U.S., I know a lot of people who have loose partnerships with one another. And there's a case to be made that the whole employee-employer model is obsolete. To some extent, the reason that part of the legislation was brought in is concerns that, say, a Korean manufacturer would put a plant in and import hundreds or thousands of Korean workers, and then there would be no jobs for Hondurans. So I don't think there'll be any problem with that. Just to give you some concrete notions on the timeline, if, say, we and or other developers are able to get a project approved in early 2015, realistically, it'll probably take a year to get the land, the whole title issues addressed, and we've got some relationships with landowners right now that we're in the process of preparing for such a transition. But it'll take a year to really get the property solid for most of these projects. And then beyond that, if new construction is required, of course, then that'll take another year, 2 years. One of our projects already has some land, or some building space to lease, and some residential space to lease. So there may be some projects with existing buildings such that conceivably an entrepreneur could move down there as early as 2016. More realistically, if there's any construction involved, 2017, 2018. So I would say people interested in moving down there to take advantage of this legal system should follow this. You can do a Google Honduran ZEDE, ZEDE, for a Google notification, and that'll keep you up to date on what's going on with those. Also, if people are interested in particular business models, one of the great things is we can work with companies to make sure that we have a system that's suitable for them when they get started. So, for instance, on the medical care, we are talking to companies that want to be sure that we have a responsible regulatory framework. In essence, we can help get that in place before they get here. Financial innovation is another situation. I've been in conversation with Americans who say have Bitcoin prediction markets, and some of them are concerned about regulatory uncertainty in the U.S. So they could move down to Honduras and have a safe jurisdiction and be less concerned about the U.S. regulatory uncertainty. So I would say, Google notification for Honduran ZEDE. And if you have a specific business idea where you're wondering about the regulatory system, you can get in touch with me, and we'll put you in the pipeline. We've got quite a number of individual entrepreneurs eager to move once this happens. And we have to evaluate each situation case by case. But we would love to be able to announce to the Honduran government that we could create X number of jobs on day one. That's what this is all about, and the more entrepreneurs that can do that, the better.
Yeah, that's great. What about some other ones that are kind of similar? Are you involved with the Seasteading at all?
So I used to be on the board of Seasteading, and I'm still close to many people there. Seasteading is a fantastic example of, the idea is to create places to live at sea so we can have free jurisdictions out there. In a certain sense, there are already, some people living on oil platforms. There are also cruise ships that stay afloat. The Resident Sea, SEAE, at the end is a cruise ship that basically allows wealthy people to live there. Some of them, fly on various vacations, but basically have their permanent residence on the ocean. So to some extent, seasteading exists. The next stage would be to create more affordable versions of seasteading, as well as business models that allow seasteading to flourish. The Seasteading Institute is doing a great job of promoting that.
Hold on, I'd never heard of that before. It's called the Resident Sea. It already exists, and where is that? It's
a cruise ship that goes around the world. The there are people that have cabins there, and I suspect some of them are doing it for tax reasons.
So you can get a residency or a citizenship on this ship?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've never heard of that before. Okay.
Yeah. So it's called the World Luxury Residences at Sea, World of Residency, RESIDENSEA.
Okay.
So if people want to investigate that, and apparently there are short-term rentals occasionally possible, but most people basically buy a condo, the equivalent of a condo on there.
Okay.
So yes, and seasteading is a great possibility, but that one's probably a few years out. One of the challenges there is if you want a platform rather than a cruise ship, it's difficult to do out in the open sea. But if you're close to shore, then of course you're within the jurisdiction that is controlled by a government. Seasteading Institute has looked at various relationships with governments, including Honduras, such that they could have more freedom for an offshore platform that might be available on land. But it's probably going to be a few years before any of those are possible. I would say there's a lot of interest in doing something similar to Honduras in many countries around the world. My wife is from Senegal, and we've talked to various leaders there, as well as in several other African countries. We also have contacts in various other Central American countries that are interested in this. I would say all of these places are watching to see if Honduras works. If Honduras is successful at attracting capital investment and creating jobs, I think that within the next 5 or 10 years, we'll see 4, 5, 6 of these in other countries. And they will compete to be ever more free and flexible, thus moving towards our Let 1,000 Nations Bloom vision.
Well, that's great. I've talked to, I can't remember if you were there or not. I feel like you might have been. I was in D.C. at the Students for Liberty event. I believe it was 4 years ago. And there was a group of people there from Seasteading that I talked to, and we went to this party in a hotel. We were talking about it. And my understanding was that the first one was going to be called Blue Seed, and it was going to be near the San Francisco area for people that were having trouble getting visas, and somehow they would just come in each day or something like that.
Yeah, Blue Seed was kind of a spinoff from Seasteading. I think it's a great project. My understanding is they've had some challenges raising enough capital. They raised part of the capital, but not enough to launch. But yeah, the vision would be to have a cruise ship offshore from San Francisco with outfitted really as offices. So suppose a technology startup in San Francisco or Palo Alto wants to create a great company but needs scientists and engineers from other countries and can't get visas from them because, of course, the U.S. government limits visa access. This would allow, the vision for Blue Seed is this would allow such entrepreneurs to have world-class scientists and engineers offshore without worrying about the visa requirement. I think it is an exciting vision. It's a matter of raising the capital and making it real, and I wish them luck and hope they pull through.
What would you say the primary apprehension is that people have to being involved in one of these seasteading projects?
Well, I would say with all of these projects, there's a lot of uncertainty. The number of people that are either willing to invest in something that's this speculative or willing to donate philanthropically is very small. They're much safer investments. And with the first version of our project, all of our investors were high net worth individuals who could afford to lose a certain amount of money. But if the upside comes through, then it's worth it. So it's kind of a high risk VC sort of investment where, if it comes through, you could do very well, but you could also lose your money. It's because in the case of the Honduran government or any government, many things could go wrong. In the case of seasteading, many things could go wrong. And, there are safer investments. On the other hand, for those who either want a potential return or want the freedom or both, then the upside is so tremendous. It's worth putting, I would say without the upside of one of these projects, we could all die of demosclerosis, where gradually we all become Europe around the world. That's kind of the grim vision.
But as you said, earlier, you said something about everybody's looking at Honduras, for instance. There's a lot of zones, areas, countries, nations looking at this idea. And so all the more reason to approach this with great wisdom. I mean, because if for some reason this doesn't work out, everybody will point and say, oh, this is, this can't work out. So I don't imagine that there's a lot of chest puffing around the project in Honduras.
No, that's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. And one of our concerns, I would say, both of mine and some of the people in the Honduran government, is there's a danger that this kind of project could attract people who are, say, interested in something that has a negative reputation. Underage prostitution, drugs, various sorts of things that would absolutely destroy the project. One of the reasons we're very focused on white-collar jobs, outsourcing centers, software development, great education, is we want to demonstrate that the freedom provided by the ZEDE legislation can be used actually to create a much better community than has ever existed before in Honduras. And then if down the road people want to do other things, that's their business. But the brand positioning of this first one had better be positive in order to create a pathway for future such projects.
And most of the things that you do, I've noticed you have in our lifetime at the end of it. So I believe that with these, you say you want to have it done within your lifetime. You want to have these done. You're very optimistic about getting something like this done. So I suppose, if Honduras doesn't work out or Seasteading doesn't work out, then you guys will just keep on continuing to find similar type of opportunities, right?
Absolutely. I'm in active conversation with individuals in several African and Latin American countries who could have the ability to get something like this done. As I mentioned earlier, both Dubai and Abu Dhabi have done a very limited version already, and the fact that Abu Dhabi copied Dubai almost 10 years later shows that things are shaking. Mm-hmm. I'm certain that some kind of jurisdiction along these lines will come into being in the next 5 to 10 years. It's a matter of where and how large and how successful and how quickly it's replicated.
Well, if somebody, if they really like this idea and they want to get involved somehow, whether it's their own business or maybe help you guys out, are there any types of things that someone can do if they want to get involved in this?
I would say that, two kinds of things. One is there is a lot of confusion about the project based, I would say, on anti-capitalist media that is very distorting. And so I think simply one of the best articles was written by Reason Magazine called Blank Slate State. And so I would say that's a good resource. And I would encourage people to focus on this vision of a legal system that allows for prosperity. That's kind of at the ideological level. At the more concrete level, if people are interested, and as I said, I've had entrepreneurs approach me, if they're interested in a jurisdiction where freedom would allow them to do things, freedom in a higher quality legal structure would allow them to do things that would be difficult in other jurisdictions, they should get in touch with me, and I can put them in a pipeline of potential projects, and we can be in direct communication about when in our timeline we're likely to have a legal system set up that would allow them to really grow their business successfully. Okay,
great. I will add your, however you want them to get in touch with you, I'll add that into the show notes below if people are interested in doing that.
Excellent.
Yeah, so, there's also just a lot of things that, you've done in your life. Presently, you're helping out people with a lot of educational type of things. What's your kind of philosophy on educating, and what are some new ways that people are approaching education nowadays?
Great. No, thank you. And this actually wraps back into the Honduran project. So I've just started a school that's it's a secondary school, grades 6 through 12, that integrates college prep with entrepreneurship. So all of our students are taking a social entrepreneurial course where they're working with real clients, in some cases websites, marketing videos, digital marketing, direct sales, so that by the time they come in at the age of 11, by the time they're 12, 13, they actually have experience as an entrepreneur and with various real situations, while also doing the academic work they need to get into the college of their choice. We are partnering with an entrepreneurial incubator so that by the time our students are juniors and seniors, they will have various startups on site that they can be ready to work for if that's their desire, and as well as a design firm so they can learn how to do design. Because I see entrepreneurship, design as 21st century skills that are useful in a huge range of environments, so that once students develop these skills, they can go to college if they want, or they can just start as entrepreneurs and make money and create value. We are doing this sort of package school plus entrepreneurial incubator as a whole unit that could be replicated in Honduras. We've got various U.S. cities, other U.S. cities beyond Austin interested, because most school, I believe, traditional education is training in passivity and dependence, and so we're spending immense amount of money not being effective academically while also thwarting the entrepreneurial drive. I think that we can create a much better education that results in amazing teenage entrepreneurs while also providing world-class academics at less cost than is the case for traditional education.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So saying that, if this goes through, people will they'll buy into this, or is this how does this work? Is some sort of grant program, or people have to buy this schooling?
So right now, I've got a private school in Austin, the Cabelli Strong Incubator in Austin, Texas. We've got 33 students. For our facility, our middle school is full. We've still got space in the high school. We're looking for additional facilities so we can expand. So it's actually a real school functioning right now, and we're looking at replicating the model in other cities as early as next year, depending on the situation. We also intend to provide basically a template so anybody can replicate this kind of a school on their own. I would like to see millions of kids escape mainstream education. Just one of my other themes is that I think much of adolescent dysfunction, drug addiction, bullying, various forms of eating disorders, all sorts of things, I think, are ultimately because most students experience school as mind-numbingly boring and cruel. So if you take young people out of the boring, cruel environment that we put them in and put them in places where they have the opportunity to demonstrate their responsibility and capacity while also being respected, in my experience, children change dramatically and start becoming productive citizens, making the world a better place through entrepreneurship.
Well, we've been talking with Michael Strong, author and pioneer in education and independent learning. This man is involved in a lot. You hear him talk a lot about how entrepreneurial capitalism really is the answer to prosperity and helping to lessen poverty in the world. But yet at the same time, he's so actively involved in other things, such as legal systems, recognizing, that he has to advocate for a legal system that allows for prosperity so that the most people possible can benefit. And then, of course, education. All of this works together. Is somebody doing dishes in the background, Michael?
Actually, my wife is making a little bit of sound. Is it?
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
Your wife also, I saw you first both, I think, on the Stossel program several years ago. And so I've actually followed you both. You made a move recently, didn't you?
We did. We moved from New York to Austin. And yeah, my wife is a Senegalese entrepreneur. Her company is Tiosan, indigenous Senegalese recipes and ingredients for high-end skincare products. She just launched her product at Nordstrom's as well as various other boutiques nationally. And she, as an entrepreneur, is one of my inspirations. She realizes that Senegal, one of the most highly regulated countries on earth, is poor because of excessive regulation. And one of our goals after Honduras is to create a startup city in Senegal so we can create prosperity there. And she can employ hundreds and thousands of people there.
That sounds fantastic. What a couple. So we like to leave our guests with a question. James, ask Michael the question.
Sure. Like so if somebody's listening to this podcast, we'll say that it's someone in their 20s or 30s, and they would like to do this. This is the Borderless podcast. We talk about people living beyond their own borders, whether it's national borders or psychological borders, people that want to create their own life for themselves. You've done a lot of stuff with your life. So what would you say to somebody, the best piece of advice that you could give to somebody who is thinking about venturing or doing something on their own?
I would very much design an entrepreneurial opportunity that could take advantage of new freedom opportunities somewhere on Earth. I'm looking at the long term, but because I think that there will be extraordinary opportunities in the next 5 to 10 years, those people who have designed a business that will be perceived positively in a local community somewhere on Earth and which could be profitable given the right legal system are going to be ahead of the game. They'll be kind of at the bleeding edge. So I would encourage people to think well beyond existing boundaries to what would be possible if I had a great legal system in a developing nation with low taxes and regulations. And send me the business ideas, and we'll get you plugged in Honduras or Senegal or somewhere.
All right. So how is it that they can get in touch with you, Michael?
So I Skyped you my best email address, michael.strong@consciouscapitalism.org. You can also find me on Facebook, Michael Strong. And since my wife is a beautiful Senegalese woman, I'm the only Michael Strong married to such a woman.
Yes,
and my photo is on my profile.
Absolutely. Please give her our best. And we hope that you get an opportunity to come visit us here in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, where we live.
I look forward to it. And we have, by the way, had interest from Mexican legislators to create startup cities there. Mexico is a big government, so it's harder. This will happen more quickly in small countries. But once it happens in Honduras, we'll put more pressure on Mexico.
Excellent.
Well, we got your back down here. We'll help you out with it.
And
Terrific.
all of Michael's information is going to be in our show notes. So if you're not able to take it down, just go there and you'll be able to find out how to get in touch with him. Thank you so much, Michael Strong, for joining us on the Borderless podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
So Michael Strong, I think, James, is fantastic. He was a great guest for the Borderless podcast.
It was. It gives you something to be optimistic about,
Yes.
And that's kind of entrepreneurial way to look at, different cities, jurisdictions, arbitration, all this type of stuff. It's very interesting.
Exactly. And he's just at the forefront of all of this. He just seems to have boundless energy. I can't believe all the different types of things that he's involved in.
Yeah.
So anyway, what we would like for you to do, if you found this interesting, would you go to our website, borderlesspodcast.com, go there, click on the Join Now button. And when you do that, not only will we send you a special gift, but also we will give you access to our private Facebook page because we'd like you to get in on this conversation. We try to bring you the best interviewees possible. So if you have any recommendations about people who would be perfect for us, please let us know. Tell us what you thought about what Michael Strong had to say about the ZEDEs going on, the potential for them in Honduras, the seasteading perhaps that might happen. Go ahead to borderlesspodcast.com, click Join Now, and we'll give you access to that private Facebook page. Also, if you can go to iTunes and rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, it would help us out a great deal. Please do that.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.